from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up on Ag Day, 1 year into his tenure as Ag Secretary, Sonny Perdue testifies to the Senate Ag Committee on the I-80 planning tour.
Farmers in northwest Indiana experienced historical flooding over the winter due to one of its rivers. We have a planting update from that location ahead in the show.
In agribusiness, building demand.
With a lack of volatility in these markets and these relatively cheap prices, for example with corn, is that has encouraged a growth in our consumption. In other words, our demand base is built.
And from waste to wallets, this fancy leather is turning heads in Mexico.
Ag Day, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The Congressional Budget Office's latest outlook projects real gross domestic product will grow by 3.3% over the next year. That would be a 15-year high. Well, the ag economy, however, is on a different path. Crossing the one-year milestone since taking the office, Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue testifying in front of the Senate Ag Committee about the state of the rural economy. The conversation ranging from economics to the farm bill, even rural infrastructure. Perdue saying that farm finances remain a concern.
You're fond of saying we're in a rough patch, and I certainly agree with that, but I fear that it's moved to the whole farm, not just one patch in the farm. Well, there's a lot of anxiety out there. You've enumerated some of that.
The panel also asking questions about the renewable fuel standard and trade policies. Perdue reiterating he applauds President Trump for standing up to China regarding the trade deficit and intellectual property theft from U.S. companies. However, he's also encouraging the president to have discussions with his Chinese counterpart.
And I have to go back and to the president looking me in the eye and saying, you know, Sonny, I know that farmers out here are worried about what we're doing, but you need to tell them that I'm not going to let them be the casualties in this trade dispute. We're not laying out the playbook about all the authorities or what we would do. And I'm with you, Mr. Chairman. I'd rather have trade than aid. But at some point, when people are not doing right, farmers understand they don't like thieves. They don't like people who steal or cheat. They like people who play by the rules. And that's what the president's doing in calling China's hand.
Lawmakers also asking questions about the help for the dairy industry and implementation of a new dairy safety net. Meanwhile, two of the world's largest financial institutions are cautioning trade disputes that could put healthy global expansion in danger. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank warning the U.S. and China trade spat could limit global growth. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin expressing cautious optimism that the U.S. and China can work out its trade tensions. Mnuchin meeting with Japanese, Chinese, and European leaders, and without saying much, he's revealing to reporters only that, quote, progress has been made. On Tuesday, during a press conference, President Trump announcing Mnuchin and Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer will travel to China within the next few days to negotiate on trade. The trade tiff with China already impacting sorghum prices. Bids for sorghum in the Gulf of Mexico have nearly disappeared following China's decision last week to impose a 179% tariff on U.S. imports. That prompted some ships carrying U.S. sorghum bound for China to change course. Reuters reporting that Saudi Arabia has become the destination for 3 of the cargoes originally destined to China. Now, Chinese sorghum importers are asking Beijing to waive the anti-dumping deposit for imports already at sea. Analysts expecting more sorghum to make its way into feed here at home and in Mexico. And speaking of trade, negotiators from Mexico, the U.S. and Canada are still pushing hard to get a new North American free trade agreement in place. Negotiators meeting regularly in recent weeks, hoping for breakthroughs on some of the toughest issues. Those remaining include auto rules of origin, labor, dispute settlement mechanisms, and dairy. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer says the goal is to have a preliminary agreement by May 4th with congressional approval before December holidays.
I'm hopeful that we will see a successful NAFTA conclusion here shortly. That's never done till it's done, never over till it's over, but I'm hopeful that we will do that.
Mexico's own legislative session ends August 31st, and any agreement would need to be done before then. Recent rains have eased fire concerns in northwest Oklahoma. Damage in the recent wildfire outbreak now being assessed, and it puts cattle losses at more than 1,100. State officials say livestock producers who lost animals in the wildfires may qualify for USDA's Livestock Indemnity Program. LIP payments are made by calculating 75% of the fair market value for the affected stock. Producers must file the losses directly with their county FSA office.
The I-80 Planting Tour, brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
Some farmers are finally kicking up dust in fields as temperatures climb higher in the Corn Belt. The latest crop progress report shows nationally 5% of corn is planted and 2% of soybeans, while in Indiana just 1% of corn is in the ground, no soybeans. That's according to NASS, both behind the 5-year average. While overall it's been a slow start, parts of the state of Indiana saw historic flooding in February. Betsy Gibbon continues our I-80 planting tour in northwest Indiana, where farmers are happy to finally be kicking up dust.
Few words sum up how spring is treating farmers in northern Indiana.
Oh, it's like everywhere else. It's been cold and wet.
It's wet and cold.
It's been cold, it's been wet, windy.
Roughly a week after snow blanketed the area, fields are starting to dry. The sluggish start to planting may be over as temperatures inch higher.
And I think we've turned a corner here. Not that we're not going to have some chilly shots of air, some rain, but it looks like a more typical spring pattern coming in over the next few weeks.
Good news for farmers like Eric Wapple, a sweeter feeling following a sour February due to major flooding.
The Kankakee River, just 3 miles north of here, we had the worst flooding we ever saw on it. We had a few farms right along the river. One of them were still pumping, trying to get the ditches down.
600 to 700 of his acres underwater for almost a month and a half.
The water's low on all these pictures because you couldn't get to it when the water was 2 foot higher. And for about 2 weeks I thought I could stop it, and then at one point I'm like, there's no way we could have.
Now they may be some of his last fields to plant.
The one farm, it might be a couple more weeks where we could get over it, but we should be somewhat on time in those farms yet.
Well, that was an amazing flood. We had snow on the ground, several inches. There was a frozen ground, and we got a whole bunch of rain on top of it. So the combination of all of that led some of the rivers in northern Indiana to hit historic levels.
Still, Wapple began planting his driest fields over the weekend, with both corn and soybean planters rolling at the same time.
I'm not too worried yet. The forecast looks decent for next week. As long as we can get out there and fire on all cylinders, get some acres in, I think we'll be fine.
It was 40 degrees.
The ground is not quite fit to plant for Jeff Peterson. He needs a string of days to continue the field work he started over the weekend before he even thinks about dusting off the planter.
I would say we have a good week and a half of field work. And I also sell seed, and I'm trying to get deliveries done.
He says it's not a worry for his customers or him for now.
Typically, I would say right in my immediate area, we don't get started planting till the last week of April.
As Peterson continues to deliver, he says none of his clients have returned their seed for earlier varieties or to switch from corn to soybeans just yet.
Our planting season goes on a little longer maybe than some other areas.
As May moves closer for these farmers, there's optimism the rest of the growing season will be better than spring. Reporting for AgDay, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Peterson says corn is a prominent crop because there's an ethanol plant in his area. Wapple says he's heavy on corn acres this year for economic reasons. He thinks he'll get a better price given his acreage mix. Better weather has producers rolling this week. Let's get an update from Mike Hoffman. Today's crop comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. Peter Gill in Putnam County, Illinois, starting up the planter this week and has the picture to prove it. USDA says 4% of corn has been planted in Illinois. That's 16 points behind the 5-year average. No soybeans have been planted as of the week ending on April 22nd. That's only 1 tick below average. And you can forget the corn planter in Tumbleton, Alabama. Jason Burke showing us the corn he planted March 23rd. He says temperatures have been cool in his area, but soil moisture is ideal. He plans to plant cotton on Friday. And taking a look at the wind speed forecast, you can see kind of from the Great Lakes to West Texas, southeastern New Mexico, a little bit windy this morning. That moves into the Rio Grande area in Texas, continues through parts of the Great Lakes. And it becomes windier later today and overnight across the northern plains. You can see that next little cold front kind of moving through. So by later today, we're from the western Great Lakes into the panhandle of Texas. We'll talk more about your forecast coming up in a few minutes. But first, here are some hometown temps.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
When we come back, we'll talk about demand, how hard is it to develop, and how fast can it change? Analysis with Brian Basting. And would you turn this into these in the name of conservation? Details today in the country. In agribusiness, another mixed day for markets with livestock seeing gains early, but how did things close? For that, we head to the floor of the CME in Chicago.
And as we look at live cattle, or we'll call it fat cattle, what do we see here? It looks like the panic is over. With the trade war talk and the tariff talk was the real crowning blow, which pushed the fat cattle down to about 97. Of course, now we're trading around near the 105 level. Of course, we're buyers at 103. We think that we're going to see a minimum of 110, 111 here before it's all said and done. And as we look at wheat today, and of course, we asked the question whether or not, and of course, you can take that either way, but it hasn't been about the weather. There's been some areas that haven't had rain for over 200 days. But of course, then we've got this side of the equation that says that we've got too much supply anyways. You've got the trade wars, you've got the tariffs, you've got everything going on. In the meantime, you've got wheat that is sitting in a great level and should be looked to be bought. I think when you look at the overall picture, wheat itself has been very much mistreated. As we look at it, it's kind of like the stepsister or whatever when you look into the overall big picture. But at the end of the day, we think that buying on support is the way we should be looking for it. This is Todd Horowitz, coming to the floor of the CME Group in Chicago.
Here at the Agribusiness Desk, we have Brian Basting, Advanced Trading, our guest here. Brian, let's talk about the idea of using the crop that we have, because carryover numbers are pretty big, especially for corn.
One of the things that's kind of gone under the radar, Clinton, the last couple of years is with a lack of volatility in these markets and these relatively cheap prices, for example with corn, is that has encouraged a growth in our consumption. In other words, our demand base is built. It's not just China in terms of the soybean consumption, which is great to see. We've increased our coarse grain consumption worldwide. Places in the Western Hemisphere consuming more corn, different places across in Asia. Point being is that with the demand being so strong or growing, we need to continue to grow big crops here in the U.S. So that's good news from a producer standpoint.
Yeah, we always like the idea of, hey, we need a big crop just to keep things moving along. How much future demand is out there? Can we continue to grow at the rate we've been growing?
It's always a bit of a balancing act, Clinton, because as prices start to rally, for example, on a weather concern or maybe some new demand growing faster than expected, well, then that's going to at least slow down the growth of demand because the price is higher. So it's always a balancing act, but I'd say initially, with the growth we've seen, that's going to be with us for a while. Prices rarely stay very low or very high. It's usually in the middle. I think for the short term, that's kind of favorable from a producer standpoint.
Yeah, and that lack of volatility has probably helped build up some of this demand. Huh?
It really has. It really has the last couple of years.
All right. Appreciate it, Brian. Thanks so much for being here. We'll be back with more AgDay in just a minute.
To talk with Brian one-on-one, call Advanced Trading at 800-664-2314 or head online to advanced-trading.com.
Is now the best time to sell your old equipment? Pete's Pick of the Week keeps you up to date on current market prices, making it easy for you to know when to sell your equipment for the best possible price. Text PETE6 to 31313 to get started.
Welcome back to AgDay. Your meteorologist Mike Hoffman looking at the root zone moisture map. And Mike, you can see where the differences were made with that rain that came through last week.
Yeah, just a little bit of rain, West Texas, panhandle of Oklahoma, and brought it back to normal for the root zone moisture. Of course, you're still in a long-term drought. Some wet areas, Tennessee, Ohio Valley, and that area continues on up into the Great Lakes and then westward toward Montana. Very dry areas, obviously, the central and southern Rockies into parts of California. Mid-Atlantic states a little dry, and central Mississippi Valley a little dry as well. Taking a look at the weather map today, we have multiple systems. The biggest one, the wettest one, is the one over the Mid-Atlantic moving toward the northeast. This has been that very slow mover over the past several days. It's moved from the southern plain states eastward, and you can see most of that's rain, a little bit of snow on the far northern edge. This system is diving southward across the plain, so a little bit more moisture for those areas that we just talked about. You can see by later today, showers and thunder showers from Missouri all the way down into southern Texas, and also lots of rain across the northeast, especially into New England. Cold front exiting Florida, so you folks dry out for the most part. By tomorrow morning, this system will be moving through parts of Mississippi, Louisiana, eventually into Alabama and Georgia. Still dealing with the northeast storm system. That's been, like I said, a very slow mover. Still a little bit of rain later tomorrow in far northern New England. And another cold front, weak system develops along it. That'll have a few showers in the central and northern Mississippi Valley. Precipitation estimate over the past or coming up over the next 36 hours. You can see we're looking for the heaviest amounts in the northeast, New England, a few spots across the southern plains, southern Mississippi Valley, and also as far as snowfall is concerned, probably could have taken this one out today. Nothing in the lower 48. Hey, I think we've turned a corner. No winter anywhere to speak of. High temperatures this afternoon, 50s across most of the northern plains. You have to go pretty far south, though, to get into those 70s and 80s. That's where the real warmth is. Lows tonight going to drop into the 40s, a few 30s there across the Great Lakes, even some upper 20s up around the Sioux. And you can see 50s and 60s into the southeast. And highs tomorrow afternoon starting to heat up in the southwest. Florida is still pretty warm, otherwise comfortable across most of the middle of the country. Jet stream again has changed over the past couple of weeks. We're still seeing a quick shot of chillier air there for the weekend, Great Lakes in the northeast. Then the ridge builds back up again. That looks pretty warm to me by Wednesday of next week, all the way up into the Great Lakes. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. First of all, Medford, Oregon, lots of sunshine, very warm today, high of 85 degrees. El Reno, Oklahoma, periods of rain and cooler, high of just 58. And finally, Houghton Lake, Michigan, clouds along with some sunshine, high of 67.
Leafy green growers in Arizona are speaking up about a recent E. coli outbreak. That's next on the Packer TV. And if you love boots, these Mexican beauties might just be the next hot trend. Fish skin kicks today on In the Country. On the Packer TV, the investigation into an outbreak of E. coli linked to chopped romaine lettuce continues. More than 50 people were reported ill across 16 states. The lettuce now traced to Yuma, Arizona. While much of the production has now shifted to California, some is still coming in from Florida and Mexico. The leafy greens industry says they've been working closely with health officials to find the source. The University of Georgia is hoping a new system for identifying foodborne pathogens can help in the future. Researchers there are working on a test that can sequence disease DNA within a day or two rather than the weeks it takes using current methods. The scientists hope that identifying problem pathogens before the products make it to consumers will help cut down on the number of foodborne illnesses in the country. And out in California's Coachella Valley, grape harvest is getting started soon. Growers telling the Packer that the crop will be down slightly from last year, but last year was considered a bumper crop. Early sweet green seedless varieties will ship first, followed by the flame seedless varieties. Output from the 7,000-acre growing region is projected to be 4 to 4.5 million 18-pound cartons. All right, when we come back, making the most of a fishy byproduct from Mexico.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit KubotaUSA.com today.
A project to find an ecological way to dispose of stinking, rotting fish skins has spawned a new industry in Mexico. And what was once a waste problem is now a high-fashion accessory. Tilapia fish farming, gaining popularity as an economical source of protein, but processing the fish for food leaves behind a lot of fish skins. Now, rather than throw the skins out, researchers found a proven way of tanning the skins for use in things like boots, handbags, and clothing. The new use adds value to the fish industry and creates a soft, flexible, and durable product. But it's not without challenges. Fish skins are small, so they have to be crafted into items that are the appropriate size. Researchers are now looking for the best way to stitch the skins together to make larger products like coats and jackets. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Spend part of your day with us. For Mike Hoffman and Betsy Gibbon, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.